Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
I just am amazed and give you that applause right now. And how many other people in our lives do something similar that we could applaud? And how many things do we do for others that we could then give a moment to ourselves and say, look at what I did, look at who I am and what I've amassed to be able to offer something of value.
Arrogance is the opposite of humility, not confidence. Confidence is not the opposite of humility. Competence is not the opposite of humility. So you can be confident, you can be competent, and be humble.
So my nephew, he's learned to clap. So and he's kind of clapping all the time. But there is something to be said about starting at a young age, finding those kind of salient moments really where you can applaud for yourself.
Bravo, everybody.
Bravo. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
And I get to kick us off today. I was very lucky. I got to go visit my family in California for my nephew's birthday, his first birthday. Yes. And my brother and sister-in-law asked me to make his cake for him. And so I had a lot of fun visiting them. And as I was flying out there, I had a direct flight from Chicago to the Orange County area. And as we were about to land, and I'm sure, Elizabeth, you've experienced this, maybe you even started yourself, listeners, maybe you are one of these people. When we landed, people clapped for the pilot and the crew and everything. And, I would say it was mixed. There was a smattering. I don't think it was like everybody on the plane was clapping, and it wasn't a particularly turbulent flight, but there was applause. And okay, so then fast forward, and I'm hanging out with my brother and my sister-in-law and my nephew, and he's starting to walk. And so he's getting up and he's kind of really awkwardly moving and everything. And it's super cute, but he took a couple steps and we clapped for him. Yes, you did it. This is amazing, right?
Yes. And
then fast forward to flying back to Chicago, same thing. The plane lands and people are clapping again. And I had these these moments, and this trip was bookended by this applause. And I couldn't help but wonder, at first I was like, why are we clapping? The kind of bah humbug in me was they just landed the plane, blah, blah, blah. And then I thought, okay, wait, no. Let's take a pause here for a second. And this feat of technology and these people got me 2,500 miles safely in this huge thing, and the skill that it takes to make sure that all that happens with all the gear and everything you have to take into account. That's an applause moment, just as much as it is a child learning to take their first couple steps. And I couldn't help but wonder, are there more moments that we could celebrate with applause that are not necessarily deserving in a should kind of way, but just these applaud moments in life? And have there been times that I myself have missed an opportunity to demonstrate the magic or the cool thing that just happened with applause? So I'm just throwing that out there to see what you got and what your thoughts are.
Well, I can't help but giggle because, having grown up in Hawaii, living, back in Hawaii now, it's actually quite commonplace. I'm used to actually the applause part upon landing, especially landing in Honolulu. So I travel, often to the East Coast or, Chicago, in the Midwest, and I prefer nonstop flights. So those are long hauls. And at least in terms of Hawaii as an origin or destination, heading eastbound, tends to be, whether because of the winds or whatever. My dad was a pilot, so he taught me all this stuff. But eastbound, the flight is a little bit shorter, tends to be a little bit shorter than westbound heading into Hawaii. So those nonstop flights from Chicago or O'Hare or JFK or Newark or LaGuardia, those nonstop flights coming into Honolulu are long. And there are people that have saved their life savings in order to have a trip to Hawaii. So
Right.
that landing in Honolulu International Airport, I'm I'm used to that. Actually, the funny thing, I'm used to that when the plane lands, because it's more often than not that there is applause. And then I'll also, I mean, I hate to bring this up, but it is an amazing feat with landing, smooth or rough, to just land safely, especially in the wake of that Alaska Airlines
Yep.
window door literally blowing off, and some guy's t-shirt being ripped off of him. And thank God, there were no serious injuries and no fatalities at all. But yeah, it is quite a feat that is deserving of applause. Like you said, your nephew getting his first steps. I can't help but also giggle in terms of, kids learn their reactions a lot of times. They learn their reactions from adults. And so, I mean, I know as a parent or myself, or witnessing other parents as they would witness their toddlers try to learn how to walk. Of course, there's applause, of course, when those steps are successful. But what's equally important actually is when the child stumbles, falls, and is about to cry. Many a time, the kids, before they actually let out a wail, look around to see the reaction. And if there's a lot of, oh my God, and a lot of fear, that's actually what often triggers the crying response. Whereas if upon stumbling and falling, there's applause from the adults in the room, then it's no big deal. And I just find that a cute, applicable lesson that is given with grace to toddlers, but actually as adults, it's how we approach our stumbles and falls and how we look at it, and whether we can applaud ourselves, for the effort that is just as important for us adults. It's so funny because a little slight tangent, I hope that you don't mind, in terms of the applause, is how self-applause is important to keep ourselves going. And the Emmys, by the time this is published, listeners and viewers, I know that the Emmys will have been over a month old, but not just recently the Emmys occurred, and Niecy Nash is a female actor who won the Emmy for her role in something Jeffrey Dahmer or something. I didn't even see the show. Apparently, she was nominated like 5 times, and finally she won this year. And she got up there, and first thing, obviously she was excited and thrilled, and she thanked the good Lord above, and then she thanked a number of people. But then she ended by saying, and you want to know who I want to thank? I want to thank me. I want to thank myself for believing in myself, especially for believing in myself when other people didn't believe in myself. So I'm going to tell myself, you know what, girl, go on with your bad self. And her Emmy acceptance speech was received so beautifully and received so harshly. So there are those that applauded her for applauding herself. And then there was backlash in the certain types of media, saying, oh, how narcissistic that was of her. And this is the problem with America, that you've got to applaud yourself and that kind of stuff. And I'm not here to judge right or wrong. I just throw out there the thought process of, well, first of all, she did thank many others before she thanked herself. And, myself being, a woman of color, immigrant, it is not uncommon to be dismissed, to be snubbed, to be overlooked, to be underestimated. And so, if you kind of get used to that from the world, then who else can you rely on other than yourself sometimes to applaud yourself to keep going? And, Snoop Dogg, love him, cracks me up. Snoop Dogg did the same thing, when he got his star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And he celebrated himself and he thanked himself. But the way that he did it is that he didn't say like, I thank myself or I celebrate myself. I forget what words he used. I applaud myself. But the gist of what he was saying was, he said, I thank myself for the sleepless nights, and I thank myself for the missed meals, and I thank myself for pushing through when I was told no. And he wasn't celebrating himself for just like, being a badass and being born with it, like it was one of privilege. He celebrated himself, as Niecy Nash is celebrating herself, for, a job well done that required a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. So, I think there are moments, life isn't meant to be just self-congratulatory, but when self-congratulations are warranted, why not? If it keeps you going, if it keeps you balanced in also recognizing, that one couldn't have done it by oneself. Let's allow for a little bit of applause for others as well as for ourselves.
So my nephew, he's learned to clap. So and he's like kind of clapping all the time, and will do exactly what you're talking about. And he has learned, based on the reaction from his family, which is what you brought up, which is spot on. He has learned that like if he does something, he will clap himself. Now, of course, he's like clapping all the time, but there is something to be said about like starting at a young age, finding those kind of salient moments really where you can acknowledge, you can applaud for yourself rather than maybe hoping you're going to get it from somebody else. And we've said that often on this episode, is like, you want to do something for yourself, go ahead. Like you don't need our permission, but give yourself permission in that regard. I will say, you made a comment that made me think of something. I will admit that I find myself sometimes in a social media reel spiral of watching gymnastics videos. I think I've been pretty open that I tend to have a crush on Simone Biles, and also just there's another male American gymnast who just the stuff that they're doing, and they're just fun personalities online and everything. And I love the stance that they take about mental health and self-care, etc. One of the videos, and I can't remember who I was watching, so please forgive me. This collegiate gymnast was trying to do a skill, and she put it out there and she didn't do it. Like she landed really hard or whatever, and her coach clapped, right? And as you can imagine, the comments were like, why would your coach clap? That wasn't great, blah, blah, blah. And then she came on and said, but what did I learn in that quote unquote failure that now is actually worth celebrating? So I know now not what to do going forward to do it. And then of course the follow-up video was her succeeding and doing it. So to your point, like even the quote unquote failures can be celebrated. Like they can be something. And she was putting it out there in similar way to that actress, of applauding the struggle that she went through and putting that first. And I couldn't help but be inspired by that and take that inspiration from her to say like, oh yeah, have there been times for me that actually there was tremendous growth, learning, etc., that happened in what could have been seen as something not successful. That was certainly could have been a moment of self-congratulation or self-applause.
And maybe not even applause or congratulation, but true fact. And the reason why I mentioned this is, not celebrating, not applauding, but just true fact. If you're a badass and you accomplish something, then own that. And it makes, and the reason why I say that is Simone Biles herself. So when Simone Biles pulled out, because she had, the yips in in the Olympics. And of course, fortunately and deservedly so, there's a lot of, online support for her. But there is also a lot of haters like, you represent our country and how can you do that? And how can you possibly be the GOAT? You can't possibly be the greatest of all time if you're going to pull out and all this kind of stuff. And to her credit, I mean, and here's, she's petite, but God, pound for pound, she can take on, any NFL player. Like, she's just this tough woman, tough, accomplished, successful woman. And, what she came out with, I think it was a tweet or something, was like, I'm sorry, you haters, but I can't hear you. What did you say? I can't hear you over my X amount of gold medals and X amount of world championships, right? And it's very true. Like, it's just, if you look at the awards and medals and titles that she has amassed, de facto, she is, the GOAT, or at least one of the GOATs, right? Greatest of all times. And so here are people trying to pull her down and tear her down. And she's not, over there waving medals in her face and celebrating and applauding herself per se, but she's just owning, like, what are y'all bitching about?
Right.
Like, you cannot take away the fact that this is what I've accomplished. Not to mention the fact that I put myself at risk. If I were to try to, do what I do on the vault, and yet I have the yips. And on a much, much, much smaller scale. But I think the smaller scale matters because who of us listeners and viewers, and between you and myself, Zachary, who of us are Simone Biles? Like, I don't necessarily think that at all, obviously. So I think in many ways a smaller scale matters, because that way we can kind of self-identify and see ourselves in this story. I'm just going to mention myself in that, I remember I was on a speakers panel, and I had done a number of public speaking. And in fact, the speakers panel it was by request, because I had done it a couple in the past and it was well received. And so, sure, I'm happy to do it. And come to find out after that the rest of the speakers were, paid huge or anything, but it was still an honorarium. And I was telling this to my friend, and I was like, I don't know how to feel about it, because like, I didn't get paid, but then again, I would do it for free. And I was, happy to do it I did do it for free. And I said, I agreed to do it for free. I didn't even think to ask like, oh, what's in your budget? What's in your speakers panel budget? I just was happy to do it for free. And I would still do it again for free. But my mindset as to why, because my friend asked, she was like, well, why did you do it for free? Like, why didn't you even ask? Like, you, Ignacio, are the queen of like, ask. And if you get a no big deal, but at least you ask. So why didn't you even ask? And my answer was actually very telling, which was, I was just happy to be invited and included. And I meant that. And I still mean that it's an honor to be invited and included, but you can still have that gratitude and appreciation for being invited and included, but still have affirmation and a sense of self-worth of, asking. It's not a favor to me that I'm doing this for free. So again, I'm not saying that this is about money, but I'm just saying the mindset of like, this is the most ironic thing, given that I'm all about gratitude, but to feel grateful for everything and not recognize what you also bring to the table. It doesn't diminish gratitude, but it can empower your own sense of self-worth. Does that make sense? I guess even clearer, like, I will always be very grateful because I have no delusions in being, the first, woman resident in my, all male, very white orthopedic surgery program on the East Coast, all this kind of stuff. And so I'm very, very grateful to my mentors, to the residency program director who kind of vouched for me so that I would get accepted and match into the residency program. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. But it was those very own mentors, those very same mentors to whom I feel grateful. They're the ones who reminded me last summer when I happened to be in Washington, D.C. and visit with them and expressed in tears my gratitude to them. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that actually had to remind me, yeah, but this wasn't a favor. You worked damn hard and you deserve to be there. And honestly, Elizabeth, look how you are representing us now as an alum. So thank you for your gratitude, but it's not all based on gratitude because you also earned it and you worked damn hard. And that was a really important reminder that it's not, like we say in many things in life, either or. Mm-hmm. I can be very, very grateful, but also very much own what I worked for and how hard I worked. And in some cases, having to work harder just to be considered an equal. There is truth in that. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to have been chosen to be a part of that program.
Yeah, I thank you for that, because I definitely struggle with it. That if I'm seemingly coming from a place of gratitude, then there's a deference associated with that. And that with that deference, it comes like I'm not as worthy, or I'm not as valuable, or I'm not as blank, insert, term here, which then means that I wouldn't necessarily give credit to my experience, my hard work, everything that you're talking about. So it's a good reminder, and certainly something that I'm dealing with in a personal matter in my own life right now, of like, you can have those feelings at the same time and one doesn't diminish the other. So let me just say that. I will also say, I thought of you specifically, Elizabeth, and I hope this doesn't take us too far away from your excellent point, because I will come back to it. But I thought of you as we were landing the plane, and the people were clapped, because I thought of all of the surgeons out there, and to give that scale, right? And I think that was important that you gave the scale, because there aren't many Simone Bileses in the world, but there's a lot of truly incredible things that have happened that I would say are worthy of applause. And you come out of a surgery, and the amount of skill that you have gone through, right? Or the experience, the teachings, the lessons, the years that you have gone through to perform a surgery for someone's life, for their well-being, to me is applause worthy. And I hope that there are claps that happen for you from your team or the patients or whatever. And even if they don't, I feel like the point is you could clap for yourself, because that is truly indicative of everything you're talking about right now, which is you have worked your tushy off. You to face the obstacles that you faced in this particular field as a woman, as an immigrant. And you have faced that, and the level of skill and knowledge and experience that your patients are in the hands of, literally the hands of, in my mind, deserves applause. And whether or not that ever happens to you, to your face, I'm giving it to you now, and you don't need it from me, because I hope that you can give it to yourself. But if there is ever a moment, I hope that you get it, because truly a moment that happens, listeners. So our schedule of recording is somewhat cumbersome because of our different time zones and whatnot. And to be honest, Elizabeth's schedule often bears the brunt of it because of the time difference. And she's so great and willing to work around, but she has surgeries that she has to do. And sometimes she's literally completed, I don't even know how many surgeries, and then comes and records. And I am just in awe of the fact that, and she says that she's juiced from it and everything. And I'm going on such a thing right now, so please forgive me. But I literally thought of you as we were landing, because you will do this incredible work, God's work, and then come and then record this, which is another form of your work for sure. And I just am amazed and give you that applause right now. And how many other people in our lives do something similar that we could applaud, and how many things do we do for others that we could then, give a moment to ourselves and say, look at what I did, look at who I am and what I've amassed. to be able to offer something of value. So I'm going to stop right now because I feel like I've gone on a little bit. But I just want you to know that part of my hope in bringing this up was an acknowledgement of these things that happen on a daily basis that, many of us in some ways, like we just, I don't want to say take for granted, but we just assume are part of life. A doctor performing a surgery, it's applause worthy. I'm sorry. It's definitely applause worthy. And,
Educator getting a child to believe in him or herself.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And I am inspired by this conversation because I think I am now going to go back and just take a couple moments to reflect on myself and thank me, much like that speech, because I don't do that. I really don't. I'm so quick to give it to other people, but I have struggled to give it to myself. And that reminder, I truly appreciate that from you for today. Because I want to be able to give that to myself too.
Because you deserve it.
Well, I do. You are right.
And you know why? And you deserve it not as a gift. It's just fact. Like when you that's how it keeps things from getting into the realm of self-delusion and narcissism. When you can just state by fact, like Simone Biles was like, I'm sorry, I can't hear you, naysayers. I can't hear you over my X amount of medals, X amount of championship. It's fact. Like, what are you going to do? It's fact. It's not self-aggrandizing. So that's how one can just own. That's all it is. It's just owning. And with owning those facts about oneself, then celebrate it. But at least it's not delusional celebration or delusional applause or delusional congratulation. But that's important to fill your cup that way, because there's enough people, especially with, the courageous anonymous on social media. There's enough people in the world who are going to tear you down or tear myself down. Why would I add myself to that army, right?
And I will say, it's just speaking openly, I will do that in the moment when people are complimenting me about something that I've done. I mean, so I made that cake for my nephew. Like, by all accounts, it was a rather difficult cake to make because, for all the reasons, it was humid, and I decided to do a cream cheese frosting, and cream cheese doesn't set up in the same way that normal frosting does. It doesn't hold as strongly. And so I deliver the cake, and you can imagine people are like, oh my God, it looks so good. And what do? I immediately go to, yeah, but this isn't sticking right, and this is starting to fall. And I immediately discredit my own work. And this is something small. Like,
in doing so, you're kind of discrediting the compliment givers.
Totally. Yes. Which I knew you were going to say, but at the same time, like, how quick that false humility, or that humility, that wanting to seem like I'm not boasting myself, instead of just saying, yes, I own that I made this cake. I own that I made this for my nephew and my brother and sister-in-law, and it turned out great. Like,
well, yeah. And see, there's humility, right? And even self-deprecating humor, but then there's also self-flagellation. Like, why does one have to beat oneself up? It's not about necessarily having to make yourself less or make yourself smaller or dimming your light. Arrogance is the opposite of humility, not confidence. Confidence is not the opposite of humility. Competence is not the opposite of humility. So you can be confident, you can be competent, and be humble.
Yeah. No, I mean, I associated confidence. I equated confidence and arrogance. No.
Very different.
Very different. You're absolutely right.
Confidence, quite frankly, like true confidence is actually when it's inward. So it doesn't even have to be other people know about it, other people
Mm-hmm.
see it, because confidence is actually very internal. Arrogance is very
Mm-hmm.
outward and expressing, right?
But I also wonder if confidence is also awareness of where one has room to grow, or maybe where one needs others because they don't have the skill set or the strengths in a particular area. So confidence, as I'm unpacking this now in my own mind, is also an awareness of the whole, whereas arrogance feels like I'm amazing at everything. You're right, that external messaging, that external narrative, without any kind of balance or awareness of those areas or things that you have that maybe others have that you don't have. And I didn't say that too well, but
Yeah, no, and that's why I giggle, especially like kind of since the pandemic and the growth of um social media influencers and opinion givers, and opinion as opposed to evidence. I think about science and medicine.
mm-hmm.
And you know, the there are those that are so arrogant. I'm not going to say
Mm-hmm.
confident. They say that they're confident, but it's actually coming out of arrogance when they feel that something has to be right, and that's the only way that's right. And then if something else comes up different, then it blows a theory out of the water, and everything is completely wrong. And I'm digressing. The bottom line, what I'm trying to say is this: true scientists, and on like say, Dr. Fauci,
Mm-hmm.
the thing about science and the best scientists is they have a theory, they do experiments, the data and evidence show something. We really don't use the word prove
Right.
in science. There's mathematical proofs, but in science, it's all studies have shown,
Mm-hmm.
evidence has shown. Very rarely is something truly proven,
Mm-hmm.
because the whole point of science is an evolution of knowledge. And so it's not uncommon that with other studies, evidence from those studies refute prior studies. And that's how science builds upon itself. And there is there's got to be a confidence in that process of recognizing, well, this study may show this, but another study might show otherwise. And arrogance is, there's only a few laws in science, law of gravity, for example, right? There are very few laws. So to have the arrogance of like, well, in the beginning of COVID, we were told, to stay indoors and not go outdoors.
Mm-hmm.
See, they're, liars and they're wrong. And there was an arrogance
Mm-hmm.
to those disclaimers, when really that misses the entire point
Yeah.
of scientific data and research and building upon.
Mm-hmm.
That was a huge tangent. Does that make sense? We can totally remove that.
No, if I can build off of it, I think
Okay.
that the other thing I appreciate out of what you're saying, and currently as I'm working on my dissertation, is that with the statements of this is what this study has found, are also what you're saying too, which is like, however, another study could do this, or these are the limitations of this study, or the disclaimers of like, be careful not to take this too far and make grand claims based on it. So even the researchers themselves put in the statements to remind you that the results that they found, that they're confident they found, are germane to that particular study, and that there's risk in taking it too far, building in that arrogance of taking it too far. So and exactly what you're talking about is that confidence is a fully fledged thing, which is like, this is all the stuff we've learned, but these are all the things that we want you to keep in mind that make that very specific to what we did.
Yeah, there's truly humility in
Mm-hmm.
confidence. Yep.
Yeah.
And of course, you and I, we have a tendency to kind of go deep and sometimes go like down on this like academic, rabbit hole.
No.
But also on a lighter note,
Yeah.
we talk about applause and self-congratulation. It can be literally for the sake of humor and lightening the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we talk about when, a child stumbles as they're learning to walk, and as opposed to having this gasp of horror, we clap and celebrate so that the toddler, doesn't think it's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, also, we can turn something around that can be a mortifying moment and actually turn it into a moment of light humor. And I know I talked about this on a prior episode, but it just makes me think of when I was with the kids. We were at a restaurant, and loud clash and clank because a server dropped humongous tray of a ton of plates. And it was just this loud crash and silence in the restaurant. And then the other servers clapped and woot wooted and hollered. And it just made everybody in the restaurant happy. And then everybody in the restaurant applauded. And it just completely turned around the moment. And it completely turned around the gravity, or seeming gravity, of the situation, and turned it into a moment of levity and shared joy. So, if anything, let's look for more opportunities to applaud, quote, deserved or not. Hell, even if it wasn't deserved, why not applaud? It's more fun that way. Life is not lived that way. I'd rather live a life of applause than a life of condemnation and a life of critiquing.
Yeah. You reminded me. So to your point, I was feeling something. I was upset. I was around some friends, and I went on a rant. And it's not common for me to kind of get into that mood. And a friend of mine just started clapping after I was done talking. And everyone was like, oh, like, oh, he's clapping for him. Oh, that. And then just said, are you done? Because you got it out. Like, good for you. You got it out. You said what you needed to say. And I started laughing, to your point, like, because it was tense, right? Because again, that's just not something I do. And then also it just like raised the energy. But for my friend to take your advice at that moment and just clap, yeah, it brought the humor back in. It kept things a little lighter. It acknowledged what happened. It wasn't discrediting my feelings or anything. At least I didn't feel that way. And then now we were back to just kind of like hanging out with each other again. And it was, for that moment, it was the perfect response. It was an excellent response. Yeah, it really was. Yeah.
Right. True joy, right? I mean, look at Saturday Night Live, right? Okay, so Saturday Night Live, with their guest hosts and their skits, like, they're not going for the Emmy Award of drama, right? Saturday Night Live, some of the moments of greatest laughter and joy is actually when the actors make a mistake or they break character and they're trying not to laugh, but they can't help but laugh because the skit itself that they're in and they're supposed to be acting is funny. And so there's applause there. So there's like applause in that break of character.
Uh-huh.
Do you get my point there?
Those are some of my favorite moments.
I'm like, do you get my point?
Yeah, those are some of my favorite moments when the actors crack and you can see them laughing, and then the audience starts to clap because they're in it, and then it's sorry, just quick side. As an audience member, like for live shows. So I was in a show and I had to play a character who's inebriated, and I started to kind of fumble over my words, and then I was laughing at myself, which people could kind of pick up on, and then the audience started like clapping at the same time. And later people were like, that was the best moment ever. And I was kind of embarrassed because I thought, oh, as an actor, like, that's not what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm like, forget that. This is a memorable moment that we just had together, that. And anyway, right. So yes, I totally get what you're saying is what I'm trying to demonstrate.
Yeah. I just feel like, I think we would all be just a little bit happier and a little bit lighter if we could all like just inject a little bit more applause in our life, applause for others and applause for ourselves. Like, never mind the critiquing, and never mind the to your point, the bah humbugness of like, what's the, why is there deserving of applause? Never deserving. How about let's just applause?
Okay, everybody, listeners, remember, you are not just simply enough.
Applaud yourselves because you are more than enough.
Just as you are. Period.
Bravo, everybody.
Bravo.